either traditional epistemology as well as analytic epistemology. But the point is, which you are coming to the conclusion where you put science and all kind of. Are you referring to that analytical epistemological model? Because way language plays a role. And with Professor Chaudhary, what she said, yes, there is a subject, If you go to Lehrer's book, the very knowledge is in the preface, he says that, in the introduction, he says, knowledge is absolutely dependent upon belief, which is absolutely subjective. So when I say that I believe something, it's my subjective contemplation. It's not only that I believe, there is occurrent belief, non-occurrent belief, different kinds of beliefs are there. And belief is not intuition. Belief is just a common, it's a mental phenomenon. Professor Austin was asking about that phenomenon. He says that it's kind of mental phenomenon. And that mental phenomenon, in the occurrent belief, in the case of occurrent belief, suppose I say that I believe in God, that's a non-occurrent. So are you referring to this analytical epistemological model during your conclusion when you are deriving a conclusion? This is just additional points.
Good. About the thing, as you rightly pointed out, fourth condition, the other, you also discussed the notion of completely justified and the whole word dog case. And there's also yet another thing when we talk about something like complete justification. So it's generally understood that the justification condition has to be independent of truth. Otherwise, it can simply be subsumed. We can take S believes that P, X is completely justified that P, and from that we can entail P is true. So we also do not want a close link between truth and these other conditions. They have to be independent conditions. And that is why I think Zabzewski's analysis that Gettier cases, until we have some account of luck, her own route is through virtue epistemology, which I think is quite innovative, is very relevant. That we need to really talk about how we can understand luck before we start talking about handling Gettier cases instead of just adding conditions, because we can always mechanically generate Gettier cases since by this double operation of luck. I'll come to this, the context of this paper towards the end. Lehrer's thing about the belief being a subjective, I think, that makes sense. I think following sir, we see belief as some kind of an intentional attitude. It's accessible to me. I guess what the epistemologists focus on is not the belief, but the content of the belief, which, because of the emphasis on language, can be made intersubjectively available. The context of the paper, as I was kind of rushing through it, I did not want to take more time. I work in philosophy of science, and in the discussions on consensus, one of the conditions that we want to talk about is, so the consensus, in order for it to indicate some kind of epistemically valuable state, it cannot be arrived at by law. So it's not really a case of, the Gettier case is something that I'm primarily interested in. I'm interested in under what condition a shared belief, in this case a consensus belief, can be seen as not arising from law. So it can't be that people have luckily arrived at a shared belief, which also happens to be true or representation adequate. So it's not that I'm really coming from the analytic tradition, but the Gettier cases seems to provide resources to think about veritic law. A better possibly way to talk about is not really in terms of Gettier cases, because as you mentioned that it is really talking about knowledge description, which in very limited case of S knows at P, but simply focus on lucky beliefs. So there possibly a modal account would be better. For these purposes, the relevant alternatives account, a modal account would say that in nearby possible worlds, the same belief is had, right? When we keep the initial conditions the same and the relevant criteria the same. So I think that would be better suited for handling these kind of cases, consensus beliefs, etc. in science. But because it was a more analytic epistemology, I felt I just focused on Gettier cases. There is also, if I may talk about, I would like to quickly discuss that Gettier cases are uncommon, but they do happen in sciences. So in 3rd century BC, this astronomer, his name is Aristarchus. Now we know that till Copernicus, there was this belief, following Aristotle, whatever, that Earth is at the center of the cosmos. Aristarchus, as back as 3rd century BC, said that it's the sun which is really at the center. Now, his reasoning, it seems, was flawed. And recently at IPC, I was speaking with a professor from IT, I forget his name right now. It seems that Aryabhata's conclusion too were arrived by faulty reasoning. So you end up with a true belief.
His name is Raghavan.
Correct, Raghavan. Yes. You arrive at a true belief, but the reasoning is somewhere spurious. So it is not really connected with the world in the right manner. So get your cases, if we take Aryabhata's belief of Aryabhata's argument for geocentrism or Aristarchus's account, this seems to be cases of get your cases. So I mean, it's not impossible, but it's uncommon.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Abhishek. I'm sure all of you would agree that this is one of the most engaging sessions. And thank you so much to both. I thank both the speakers for the wonderful presentations and then engaging with the discussion later on. I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your nice chairperson and this active session. Now, may I request our Sebastian sir to distribute to kind of laugh to our chairperson for some giving us valuable time.
I've already given so many.
Already, you will take now from him. Already, you gave him now. You will, this is the reciprocal. So may I request our team to bring a printed. बाला सर का जो चेहरा है वो चेहरा से खुदा हुआ एक काम सेबास्टियन सर के हाथों से बाला सर को मिलना चाहिए और पानी सर मैं रिक्वेस्ट यू टू टेक अ फोटोग्राफ so give and take this policy is applying here now may I request our thank you sir may I request Sebastian sir again to distribute certificate to our N Ramping sir Dr. N Ramping sir. Please come here and to receive your certificate and to kind of love from Sebastian sir. This is a token of love and along with the certificate. Now may I request Dr. Abhishek Kashyap sir to receive your certificate and token of love from our Sebastian sir. Young energetic professor from IIT Guwahati. In here. Dr. Abhishek Kashyap, he is receiving a certificate from Sebastian Sir and Pali sir is busy engaging to take the photograph. So I request you, I don't instruct you. That means I think this will be the broadcast after the end of our program. आप भूल जाते हैं सर लेकिन हम नहीं भूलते. Thank you sir. So before lunch, just we are having a last academic session. That means before lunch, not of the day. Now may I request our this third session of this day. The chairperson will be here. Our the very energetic photographer now. This is Padis sir. Lakshmi Padis sir, may I request you to take the chairperson of today's. Our Padis sir, he will be chairperson of this third session, and our speaker will be Dr. Akwizam Pravisana Madam and Dr. Urdu Sharma sir. May I request both the speakers to come on the dais and सर ये लंच के पहले से आखिरी सेशन होगा अगर ये वक्त पे नहीं चलेगा तो शायद हमारे पार्टिसिपेंट के जो पेट में जो खुदा है इसको थोड़ा तकलीफ होगा इसलिए आई रिक्वेस्ट यू टू स्ट्रिक्टली adhere to the time so that they can have the lunch at proper time. So now this microphone is about to you, chairperson Lakshmi Padis sir. Over to you, sir. So shortly we are having lunch at 1:30 p.m. So
1:30. So we have
1:30 p.m. It may be 5 minutes less or more. So I am requesting our chairperson to come back with the time.
So, friends, we are having so much engaging sessions. So academically is vibrant. The first paper presenter will be Dr. Ekoizam Thoibisana.
Dr. Ekoizam Thoibisana. He is the head of the department and also associate professor in the Department of Philosophy. Her area of interest covers phenomenology, post-structuralism and deconstruction. She is beautifully editing, the chief editor of Guwahati University Journal of Philosophy, which is indexed journal, and it's a wonderful journal. And Ekoizam is an academic professional serving as head of the department at Guwahati University with extensive experience in teaching, research, academic administration. She has also contributed significantly to higher education and institutional development. Today she will be speaking a topic, very interesting topic. Is Derrida a skeptic? Naturally, we say that skepticism starts from Greek civilization. I mean, from Socrates to till today, people are also making a distinction between academic skepticism and philosophical skepticism. But how Derrida will be fitting into that category, that is a really. I request Ekoizam to present our paper.
25 minutes.
25 minutes.
Please.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Namita and ICPR and all the college fraternity for organizing the seminar and giving me the opportunity to read this paper. If I go by the title, as Chair has pointed out, it is Derrida a skeptic? Now, the title of my paper is itself can be framed in different way. Instead of is Derrida a skeptic, it could have been Derrida's deconstruction of knowledge. The content will remain the same. So it's like how we put the things and how we present the things, but we may tell the same story. Is Derrida a skeptic, or Derrida's deconstruction of the knowledge is a story that I will be presenting before you, bringing into element the concept of, or you can say the philosophy of phenomenology, structuralism, and deconstruction as such. Because when we do Derrida, we cannot skip phenomenology and the idea of structuralism. Again, if I go back to the title, is Derrida a skeptic? Definitely the question comes about who is a skeptic and what is skepticism. And as Professor Padi has pointed out, that the question of skepticism has been there since the time of Socrates. Yes, skepticism is an important concept or important notion in the theory of knowledge, or rather in epistemology. The question whether any philosopher is skeptic or not is not so much important as the philosophy of skepticism that involves issues like questioning the theory of knowledge, the justification, truth belief. It is something that we cannot do away. When we do epistemology, these are the questions that become. So irrespective of whether any philosopher is skeptic or not, there is an indeed significance to the notion of skeptic that we cannot do away when we do any philosophy that concern with epistemology or theory of knowledge. With the same background, I will not enter into the classical understanding of what is skepticism from the Western philosophical concept, and I will not dwell into the history of skepticism as such. But the whole idea is to analyze the condition of the knowledge that is very important when we try to study epistemology as such. Again, I will go back to phenomenology as a starting point. And phenomenology as a starting point will take us to Edmund Husserl, who was fascinated by the whole idea of knowledge in terms of something that is purely phenomenological, in the sense that he was fascinated by geometry. Husserl was concerned with the theory of knowledge. The epistemology in Husserl is very strong, where he talked about the ideal truth. He wanted to come out of the radical empiricism. He started with the empiricism, then there is the method of bracketing, phenomenological bracketing. There are different levels of bracketing that ultimately lead us to the ideal truth. And where do we find the ideal truth? Ideal truth is something that do away with the object. The object that we concern here is an ideal object, and that we find only in geometry. It may be recalled that Edmund Husserl did his PhD in mathematics, and in logical investigation, we could see a heavy influence of, the understanding of the theory of meaning, then reference, and on one side of the continent where Edmund Husserl was developing logical investigation, we see on the other side, Friedrich's most famous essay on sense and reference was there. But both the philosopher, how they look at meaning and sense was very different. So while Husserl was looking for a sense, Husserl was looking for a meaning that does not have a reference as such, because object for Husserl was not a matter of important. So when we do phenomenology, we are not so much concerned about the JTP as Abhishek has pointed out. We are not concerned with justification of the belief system, but we are concerned with the origin of the knowledge. So it is here that Husserl in his writing, in his earlier days writing, wrote an essay on introduction to geometry. The origin of geometry, where he was fascinated with the origin of geometry, because geometry, he believed, is the only discipline that can talk about the ideal truth, the transcendental truth, the ideal truth, irrespective of any reference to the object, because here he is not concerned with the object. The object that he referred to is the ideal object, and it is only in geometry, not even mathematical truth. Mathematical truth, we have 2 + 2 = 4, but it is in the geometry that we can talk about the ideal truth and the ideal object as a necessary condition of knowledge. Now, when Husserl was concerning with this origin of geometry, he asks, what is the origin of geometrical truth? Where is the origin of geometrical truth? Where does geometrical truth come from? So he was looking for two things. One is the origin, and he was looking for origin in terms of the origin of the ideal truth. So origin of the ideal truth you cannot find in empirical truth, because the empirical truth cannot give you the foundation of the ideal truth. But at the same time, you cannot do away with the empirical truth also. So in the course of it, Husserl tried to confuse. There is a conflict that he has seen. Derrida will be reading Husserl, this origin of geometry, where he see the conflict that Husserl was failing to compromise the question that he raised about the origin, and then he was trying to bring it by coming out of the empirical analysis. Now, Derrida in his introduction to a long introduction, we say Derrida in his long introduction to Husserl's short essay, the origin of this geometry, traces the the paradox, I would say, the paradox that Husserl have been doing when he talked about the origin of geometry. The paradox is he was failing to bring bridge the gap between phenomenology and structuralism. Why I'm bringing in structuralism is, whereas phenomenology is looking for the essence of the meaning, the ideal truth, irrespective of any empirical representation, you also abide by the structure. We have a definite structure of knowledge. And Derrida's reading of Husserl failed to bring. He wanted to show that Husserl failed to bring the synthesis, the gap between phenomenology and structuralism as such. So this is where Derrida got fascinated, and he asks about he addressed the question of origin. He goes back to the question of origin, and this whole thing take Derrida to the theory of Levi-Strauss theory of structuralism. To put it in a very simple way, what is the origin? What is the origin? And rather, Derrida will say, what is the origin of the origin? Because the origin that we have been talking about in phenomenology is always grounded on our metaphysics of presence. So as long as you are grounded on the metaphysics of present, then Derrida is saying that you have to ask the ground of that metaphysics of present. So it is the origin of the origin that Derrida was looking forward, and that he could not find in Husserl. So Husserl idea, transcendental idea, could not address the problem of the origin. Husserl raised the question of the origin. Husserl has raised the question of the origin in discussing his theory of phenomenology, pure phenomenology, but Husserl could not answer the question of the origin of the origin. And that is where Derrida have shown that Husserl raised the question but failed to address the question. Now, where do we find this origin? Then we come to structuralism. Because Derrida, we put Derrida under postmodernism, sometimes we put him under post-structuralism, though Derrida himself never claimed that he is neither a postmodernist nor a post-structuralist. But the work that Derrida is doing cannot be he cannot escape himself from structuralism. So he post-structuralism, just as modernists work within the framework of postmodernism, work within the framework of modernism, structuralism also work within the framework of post-structuralism, also work within the framework of structuralism. So keeping in mind the question that Husserl have raised, the origin, and Derrida's explanation that Husserl failed to answer the question of origin, I will take you to structuralism. When we come to structuralism, there are Levi-Strauss account of structuralism and Saussure account of structuralism that Derrida was greatly influenced. And I would also like to say that the coming of structuralism is the collapse of existentialism, which was at the peak of time. So existentialism was, like Jean-Paul Sartre, Heidegger, Nietzsche. There was a point when existentialism was ruling the continental philosophy. But the coming of structuralism is the collapse of existentialism, because structuralism highlighted that what the existentialist has been doing, the existence, the choice, we talk about the choice, we talk about absolute freedom, is nothing but it is bounded within the structure. Everything is structured. So leaving beside this preliminary aspect of structuralism and coming to the core essay that is written by Levi-Strauss and Saussure, Derrida tried to bring in the significance of origin again. The origin that have a system. There is an origin, there is a system, and in structuralism, every system has a center. Every system has a center. Now the structuralists will point out that where is this center? Is the center in the center? To say that the center is in the center, you have to know that the center is not in the center. What Abhishek has pointed out, we have been talking about that Earth is the center, sun is the center. But the question that we have in Derrida and continental thinkers in post-structuralists is the question of the center itself. So before you understand the center, how can you use the concept of center? So we are not concerned with justified truth, belief, falsification and verification. That will follow up later on. In phenomenology, what is important is the question of the concept itself. So how do you understand the center without making a difference between center and non-center? So when structuralism talk about a structure, they say that there is a structure and there will be a center. And that center is what the Western philosophy has been talking about, is always the center of the metaphysics of presence. It may be substance, it may be God, you call it understanding, you call it knowledge, you call it essence, you call it meaning. So there is the system and there is a center. Every system, and when we talk about the system, structuralists took it as a closed system. Every system has a center. But in order to understand that there is a center, we should know that a center is different from something that is not centered. The significance that we can find from structuralism is that this center need not be in the center. The center can be outside the system also. That it holds the things together. When you talk about, say, everything you are trying to bring through the concept of, say, God, God need not be in the center. The center that we are talking about, on the basis of which you are going to understand the whole system, may be inside the center or it may be even outside the system. Maybe inside the system, or it may be even outside the system. So structuralism brings this idea of the origin, the origin, and they talk about the center, and the center may be inside the system or it may be even outside the system. What is important is that there is a center, and they also talk about the difference. Structuralism talk about the sign, about the meaning. How do you get the meaning? Meaning they will define in terms of structure. As the term structure, we can take it as a system. There is a system, there is a structure, and you understand a meaning. The language not different from a context. Everything is understood. Sign, you can call it sign, you can call it essence, you can call it meaning. Is understood within a context. So we have this three different type of difference that Derrida talk about. There is an opposition, opposite, like good, bad. We have black, white, male, female. Just go for any opposition. This is also a difference. And structuralism also talk about it. You get the meaning of a white because you know that it is not a black. You understand the meaning of good because you know that it is different from bad. So a meaning depends on the binary. This is the binarism that gives the meaning. Another thing that we get from structuralism is that it is not just the opposition. It is not that we understand white in terms of black, good in terms of bad. So it is not just the binarism. It is not just the binarism that is important in giving us the meaning. What is important in giving us the meaning is also the difference. This is the second understanding of difference. A cat is different from a dog. So why is the structuralism raised a very interesting question? Why is a cow called a cow? A cow is called a cow because a cow is not a horse or dog or whatever it is not. So why is a cow called a cow? A cow is called a cow, and a cow may be called by any other name. There is no definite explanation of why a cow is called a cow. A cow is called a cow is just an arbitrariness. This is the theory of arbitrariness that holds the theory of structuralism. So what is important in structuralism when we define knowledge is the center, and in order to understand that we do not talk about meaning, we talk about sign. So a sign is what? A sign is more than a language. What we see, a sign includes what we see, what we hear, what we understand, and we know the meaning of one sign because it is different from another sign. Now, what Derrida adds to it, and not only that, this difference, we talk about the good and bad, white and black, and you talk about a cat is different from a dog, or a cow is called a cow because a cow is not a horse. That is the understanding. But not only that, it also gives traces of meaning. When we talk about pork, for example, what are the meaning? Pork is different from, pork, when we say pork, is different from what? How do you know the meaning of a pork? Pork is different from many other things, but pork also have its own traces. We can associate it with pig, you can associate it with muddy puddle, you can associate with dirt, you can associate with mud. There are so many traces of meaning. One sign carry within itself traces of meaning, and that is the significant contribution of structuralism. Now, when we come to Derrida, what does Derrida do with it? Derrida is a product of both phenomenology and structuralism. He used both phenomenology and structuralism to do his deconstruction, and basically deconstruction in a simple way. In a simple way, if I try to explain what is deconstruction, it is also trying to find the constitution of a meaning. How do you get the meaning? And he adhered to both phenomenology, the limit of phenomenology. He started his career by doing lots of work on Husserl. He was interested in Husserl, and then he came out of phenomenology because of the limit of phenomenology. Phenomenology could not bridge the gap between the essence of meaning, the ideal of meaning, and the closed structure of structuralism. So Derrida may be rightly called a post-phenomenologist. So rather than postmodernists or post-structuralists, we can quote Derrida as a post-phenomenologist who try to address the gap that Husserl has created. And in addressing the gap that Husserl has created, what does he do? He abides by the structuralist account of difference, which already have the notion of arbitrariness and binarism. He deconstructs the metaphysics of presence and he abides by binarism. He will deconstruct binarism because every binarism is grounded by the metaphysics of presence. So he deconstruct binarism, he deconstruct the metaphysics of presence, he abides by the theory of difference. But what he add to the structuralism is the play of difference, which is also, if we want to make verbally sound different, it is also sometimes we pronounce it as difference, D-I-F-F-E-R-A-N-C-E. So difference include the notion of different as well as something that differ. So meaning in itself, he is basically not talking about what meaning is, but he is talking about the condition of meaning. Every condition of meaning is embedded with lots of paradox, contradiction, without which you cannot understand any fixed meaning. The totality that we talk about in the history of Western philosophy, in the history of epistemology, is always guided by a center which may be even outside the system. So it has to be understood within a context. Meaning definitely has to be understood in a context, but it is a contextualization. The conceptualization of meaning is never ending. So therein lies the significance of Derrida's deconstruction, where he tried to reframe. And in doing so, if we come back to the question, is Derrida a skeptic? Yes, definitely Derrida is not a skeptic because he does talk about the meaning. He addressed the question of meaning, but he is more focused on the condition of meaning. And the condition of meaning says that meaning, knowledge is embedded. They cannot come out of the paradox and contradiction that is inherent in every understanding of meaning. And the theory of difference, that is the differ, always keep the room open for a development, for a different understanding of meaning. And he has, if I read the paper, it is little technical. I have been trying to address it in the simplest way. He has addressed to Heidegger's being in time, where Heidegger's deconstruction actually started with Heidegger. Heidegger has used the word destruction of Western metaphysics, but Derrida caught him by saying that Heidegger's destruction of metaphysics is also caught in the metaphysics of presence, where Heidegger cannot come out of the notion of being. He does raise an important issue like Husserl, but Heidegger also got within the trap. He was trapped in the metaphysics of presence, where he definitely talked about is something is not mutually different from something as something. And when Nietzsche also talks about the notion of meaning, all the possibilities are included, and they have already deconstruction. It does not take root in Derrida. Though Derrida is called the father of deconstruction, deconstruction already started with Nietzsche and with Heidegger. And in this paper, I just want to highlight that yes, Derrida is not a skeptic, and that he has been, and he's not a relativist also. And this is the main criticism that we find everywhere. Every postmodernism has been criticized as some sort of skepticism and relativism for the sole reason that they do not talk about absolute truth. Yes, they do not talk about truth, but they do talk about the condition of truth. And so far as they talk and they address the condition of truth, deconstruction is not a skeptic. Last but not the least, what is important in Derrida's deconstruction is the logic of supplement. It is the logic of supplement that abides the meaning of any concept or any notion, because everything can be supplemented. Everything can be supplemented means everything can be replaced, everything can be substituted. So meaning as a total system is deconstructed in Derrida's deconstruction. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You are finished it in the stipulated time. Thank you so much. Please come. Yeah, as I stated in my introductory note that yes, Derrida is not a skeptic in that sense. But I got one clarification, but I want the house to say something, discuss on our presentation. Dr. Mao, would you like to say?
Okay, you can elaborate and you can explain further how Rousseau has failed thereby. Derrida has stepped in. Here you can elaborate. Okay?
Yeah, you can speak quietly.
Husserl has failed in the sense that Husserl tried to remain a pure phenomenologist, where he tried to talk about the essence of the meaning, a fixed essence of the meaning that is guided by structure, guided by totality. But then what Husserl did, Husserl used the method of bracketing, and then ultimately he used transcendental intersubjectivity to define the whole theory of the essence of meaning. So when he goes to transcendental intersubjectivity, Husserl is Husserl is going against his own notion of transcendental ego. Husserl is contradicting his own position. Husserl can be safe only if he talks about the condition of transcendental intersubjectivity. But if we accept transcendental intersubjectivity of Husserl, then he is going against his own notion of transcendental ego. That is why Derrida says that he is a phenomenologist in so far as he goes with the transcendental intersubjectivity of Husserl. But Husserl cannot go with the transcendental intersubjectivity because of his earlier notion of transcendental ego. And that is discussed in Cartesian meditation.
Yeah.
The introduction to phenomenology.
But when he talks of that transcendental ego, he's talking in a different context. So, where do you want to bring in his contradiction? He's talking about somewhat like Kantian,
Yeah.
unified unity of the perception, something like that. He's trying to talk about that. So there, how he can be criticized there from there.
The unification is something that Derrida doesn't.
But that plus that and the intersubjectivity in case of personal are quite different. They are quite different.
Okay, Professor Mao will discuss later. Now let us process fast here.
No, sir. We just congratulations to the teacher. But I have some kind of thing about things. Number one is about the metaphysics of the sensing. The second one is about the notion of transcendental. In fact, strictly speaking, or purely not chronological framework, transcendental is not that which is given to experience, but that which is the basis of what experience. Like in manual time, space and time. Space and time are the arbitrary conditions of experience. We can also talk about experience, space and time. So also, when Husserl talks about the transcendental ego, okay, that which cannot be transformed again, because that is the last, you can say, last one. Now, coming back to the question of metaphysics of presence, I think later on those, there has been a particular subject for it, sense like a substance, exotic substance, Plato's poem, and Christian fathers, Aquinas and Augustine and St. Jerome, the world. Okay? So there is something which is there as a, what to say, centrality. Aristotle talks about, 10 categories, substance, quantity, relation, space, time, action, position, like that. But now the question is that, when we think about the artificial categories, time, space, action, whatever, that is also a part of what is called the substance of it. So now my question is that, but your point, what do you understand precisely by not metaphysical presence? Without which, epistemically and ontologically, can it postulate something? That's it.
The whole crux of Derrida's deconstruction is a criticism of metaphysics of presence, where he has discussed basically with reference to Heidegger's understanding of being and time. Where here, I would say that the metaphysics of presence here is that centrality. Well, you have rightly pointed out, it may be substance, it may be category. But what Derrida is saying is that that substance can also be replaced or substituted by any other. So insofar as it can be substituted and replaced by any other, there is the deconstruction of the or the critique of the metaphysics of presence. He is not against anything, but he is saying that what we have accepted as the presence of the metaphysics, it may be God, it may be category, even in the case of Kant's understanding and sensibility. What Derrida added is that he is not against Kant's understanding and sensibility, but what he says is that play of the understanding and sensibility. So this notion of play, this notion of difference, change the whole game.
Okay, thank you. Abhishek. Probably like two questions, but from outside the tradition, because I think I'm on the side of debate and everything. But if we talk about this notion of center, it seems that in epistemological center, the notion of center that you will critique using data, can one not take again a Quinian perspective in which the center becomes a pragmatic choice? So in this, there's a very evocative metaphor of Weber. It is not that the center is a principal center. It is just that we pragmatically choose to refuse modifications there, because modifying that particular, for example, mathematical tool will lead to modification everywhere else. So then there is no center in the principal manner, but only in pragmatic sense. And I'll bring point again to talk about this notion that you talk about meaning varies traces. Is it really the case that, so we were using the example of Coke, is it really the case that the meaning carries traces, or is it the case that the sign carries traces, or is it the case that the user of the sign carries traces? A person who is not familiar with the language would not really think of these associations when they use the term Coke. So again, following point, can you not simply reject the notion of meaning altogether and say that what really happens in these cases is the notion of meaningfulness? A particular conversation becomes meaningful for a particular person, but need not be meaningful for the other person. So again, I know I'm coming from outside the tradition.
No, it's not outside, it's very much inside. The center that you are talking about is exactly what Derrida said. I'm speaking it from the perspective of Derrida. You have explained me beautifully from the perspective of Quine. So center is a center which is used pragmatically. Derrida did not use the word pragmatically, but it is a center that can be supplemented or replaced by anything else. And then when you talk about the meaningfulness, there I may have some difference. Meaning, he does not see, Derrida does not make the traditional, conventional distinction of the knower and the known. So it can be both sides. And here I could see that correlation that we find of it can be the object may influence you or the subject may influence the object. So that binarism is already deconstructed. So it is not a matter of who is the subject and who is the object. But he will definitely go against meaningfulness, because every meaning is open. There is no closed system. So that is the default. So that is I would say the contribution of Derrida.
Thank you, Dr. Tulisana, for this wonderful explanation, and thank you everybody. Now I request Arup. Yes, Arup Jyoti Sharma. Dr. Sharma has been teaching in the Department of Philosophy at Tripura Central University since 2010, and he obtained his PhD degree from JNU in 2010. His area of interest include ethics and Western philosophy, and he has published a recent book. The title of the book is Kant's Moral Faith. It is published by Motilal Banaras Das in 2024. 2024, and also he have completed an MRP, minor research project, funded by ICPR in 2017, and he has published. He is a good scholar in Kant. Again, today he will be presenting a paper on knowledge and reality gulf, Hegel against Kant. In Hegoism seminar in Guwahati Beach, we heard about the presentation of Professor R.M. Singh about Hegel and Kant. It is very difficult that how Hegel solves the problem in Kant. And let us listen Arup's position on that. Thank you, Arup. Please.
So, a very good afternoon to all of you. First of all, let me thank Principal, Madam, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. So, Madam has been in contact for many months. And I'm really looking forward to today's seminar. It is altogether a kind of a different experience altogether. The the moment I reached here yesterday until today. So I'm really very happy the things are happening here. So thank you once again, madam. Thank you also our chairperson sir and all the respected dignitaries. So today I would like to speak on knowledge and reality divide that Kant has made. I mean, he has contrasted between knowledge and reality, and how Hegel has tried to solve this dichotomy. And in a process, I will also see how much Hegel is justified in his criticism to Kant, because that is an additional thing, and that would be probably my contribution to it. Because the way Hegel has criticized, I mean, somewhere I feel that, uh, probably Hegel has not properly understood him, or I mean, that is my opinion about it. So let me begin the paper in this way that Kant actually, he limits knowledge, as we know, that to the domain of phenomenon, and as he rightly says in the critique of the pure, the preface to the critique of pure reason, that I limit knowledge to phenomenon in order to make room for faith. So Kant's synthetic a priori knowledge is basically, uh, I mean, it is grounded by sensibility, which has its two a priori forms that we know, space and time, and they are organized by the categories of understanding. So in a way, I mean, what we are having in this process is the synthetic a priori knowledge, and that synthetic a priori knowledge is possible in the domain of phenomenon, leaving aside the unknown domain of the thing in itself. Now, Hegel has said that as long as the thing in itself lies outside the domain of human cognition, then there is the dichotomy or the gap between the appearance and the objective reality, or the subjectivity and the objective reality. And when we look at in both these philosophers, Kant and Hegel, then we have found that both these philosophers have given importance to the faculty of reason. But the way Kant has used reason. Reason is in the form. Reason is. Reason is the critical reason that he is talking about in the critical pure reason. So, what is critical about it? What is critical about this reason? So, critical reason is basically to curb the limitations of human knowledge. That means human knowledge cannot go up to any extent. So it can go only within the domain of sensibility and understanding, that is within the structure, sensibility and understanding, and gives in this process the synthetic a priori knowledge. So beyond that, wherever our knowledge has a limit, and beyond that there opens the area of the faith. So everything is obviously not possible for us to know. That is what Kant has said, and opens the room for speculative reason, where Kant is talking about the transcendental ideas. So what he has referred to, basically the three domain, it is the freedom of the freedom of the will, immortality of the soul, and the existence of God. So these are outside the domain of human knowledge, and that lies in the domain of the faith. So in faith, reason is guided, and that reason is basically the practical reason. And here in critique of pure reason, reason is the pure reason. In morality or in religion, Kant is talking about reason is more in the practical. So the practical reason, practical is more in the form of normativity that he is talking about. But in pure reason, pure reason means basically it talks about the limitations of human knowledge, how far knowledge can go. Because the basic question is, how is synthetic a priori knowledge possible? So synthetic a priori knowledge is possible within the the spatio-temporal structure, and which are also organized by the categories of understanding. Beyond that, our knowledge will not work. But in that reason that that Kant is talking about, it is in the form of a dichotomy. The same reason Hegel is also talking about. But here, reason is in the role of unification. It has that unifying role, because it is very, very significant, because the time that we see in Kant was born in 1724 and he died in uh, uh, 1784. And Hegel was born in 1770 and he died in 1821. So Hegel was, in a sense, Hegel and Kant were almost contemporary, though Hegel came later and Kant. So he was aware of, and he was very much actually influenced by Kant's philosophy, but he says that the reason which is in the form of a dichotomy in Kant, here reason is in the form of an unifying role. So he says that whatever is rational is also real, and what is real is also rational. So that reason does not create a dichotomy, reason rather tries to solve the dichotomy. And this is actually really very, very interesting in Hegel. Now, let me go to the uh, uh, the critique of pure reason that Kant talks about this dichotomy a little bit. He divides the critique of pure reason into two: transcendental doctrine of elements and the transcendental doctrine of matter. Transcendental doctrine of elements is further divided into transcendental aesthetic and transcendental logic. Now, the transcendental aesthetic, Mauser has rightly said, it has nothing to do with aesthetics. That Kant is talking about aesthetics in the critique of judgment. That is not a thing. Here, Kant is basically interested to talk about the human sensibility, the a priori forms of human sensibility. So, transcendental logic is further divided into transcendental analytic and transcendental dialectic. Now, transcendental analytic gives us these 12 categories of understanding, and we have the transcendental dialectic. So, transcendental dialectic is again, in a sense, that is outside the domain of human knowledge. Now, transcendental aesthetic and transcendental analytic together gives us the synthetic a priori knowledge in Kant. Now, though Kant says that we do not have any knowledge about the about, say, the freedom of the will or the immortality of the soul or the existence of God, but he says that these are from our practical consideration, from the consideration of morality. We say that it has also a very significant role. So he says that in the transcendental dialectic, Kant criticizes systematically any attempt to apply the categories outside the field of experience. His general argument is that whenever one attempts to do this, one is led into error, contradiction, and paradox. Now, he says that we can have this immanent metaphysical knowledge of synthetic a priori principles that structure all possible human experience, because they are grounded in our pure forms of sensible intuition, space and time, and the pure concepts of our understanding, the categories. But Kant's argument for this immanent metaphysics rests on his claim that human knowledge can result only from applying concepts to intuitions, or more precisely to schemata, mediating the application of concepts to appearances. This key claim implies that transcendent metaphysical knowledge, knowledge of objects that transcend the boundaries of possible human experience, is impossible for us, since it will involve deploying concepts independently of intuition or schemata. In fact, this is what Kant wants to establish in the transcendental analytic, the possibility of synthetic a priori knowledge in the phenomenal domain, leaving aside the unknown domain of things as they are in themselves. However, Kant in the transcendental dialectic also argues that transcendent metaphysics is not only possible but also actual. He wants to establish the position that we can have a priori knowledge about three transcendent objects in particular, that is the human soul, the world whole, and God. This is one of Kant's main goals in the dialectic, which he pursues mainly in Book 2, to have found arguments for transcendent metaphysical claims. But although Kant holds that humans can have knowledge about non-empirical reality, he does not deny that the existence of such a reality is a legitimate topic of human concern. On the contrary, he believes that there are three specific topics of rationalist metaphysics that are legitimate and inevitable topics of human concern. These are God, human immortality, and human freedom. Kant's position with respect to these topics is that although we cannot know whether God exists, whether there is an immortal human soul, or whether humans have free will, we may believe in God, immortality, and freedom. Furthermore, for the purpose of action and morality, we ought to believe in them, despite the fact that there is no way we can know whether these beliefs are true. He argues that whereas we must admit that our knowledge extends only as far as the limits of experience, still there are more grounds for believing in God, immortality, and freedom. As Kant puts it in a famous sentence, as I have already said, that I have found it necessary to deny knowledge in order to make room for faith. This leads Kant to show that pure reason must not be merely a source of speculative fallacies, but must also have a positive use. In point of fact, Kant argues that the positive use of pure reason is twofold. On the one hand, he argues in an appendix to the transcendental dialectic, reason's ideas of the unconditioned give rise to indispensable regulative principles for the conduct of scientific inquiry, and on the other hand, he argues in the canon of pure reason, in the doctrine of matter, reason also gives rise to the unconditionally valid moral law as a prescription of how the world ought to be, rather than a description of how it actually is. Now, Hegel is actually offering certain criticisms to Kant. He says that he wants to set aside Kantian dichotomy between knowledge and reality. He argues that our knowledge is not restricted or limited, or that we cannot have knowledge of the things as they are in themselves. Hegel seeks to show that there are real things or real aspects of the world which can be known only by going beyond Kant's limits, and to show that we ourselves have access to this knowledge or knowledge of things as they are in themselves. Hegel is particularly critical of subjectivism and formalism of Kant's theoretical philosophy. According to him, the essence of the Kantian philosophy consists in its deep critical idealism. It plainly confesses that its principle is subjectivism and formal thinking. Kantian philosophy is subjective because even though we can think of thing in itself, yet our synthetic a priori knowledge is confined to the boundaries of sensibility only, and sensibility is the a priori condition of our mind. Again, Kant's philosophy is considered to be formal thinking because Kant's insistence that Whether in the case of the pure intuitions of sensibility or the pure concepts of the understanding, we can have a priori knowledge only for the pure forms of representation, the abstract structures of intuition, judgment, and reasoning, and must always wait upon experience for completion of the knowledge of particulars, which is for that reason never entirely a priori. While dealing with Hegel's criticism against Kant, I shall try to argue in favor of its philosophical merit. Hegel no doubt places some of the important criticisms against Kant, but sometimes it reveals that his criticisms are only external. Hegel does not engage in internal criticism of Kant's theoretical philosophy. He does not experiment that Kant's basic philosophical principles are unsound or that his conclusions do not follow validly from these basic principles. He is rather concerned about the views that Kant's conclusion falls short of his own philosophical expectations. A detailed account of some of his criticisms are just referring to. The first criticism is like this, that the opposition that Hegel objects to under the frame of subjectivism is Kant's contrast between appearances and things in themselves. Kant's claim is that although we can and indeed must be able to coherently think of things in themselves, we can have a priori and empirical knowledge only of appearances. Hegel in the lectures on the history of philosophy argues that the subject of knowledge in Kant does not arrive at reason. It is merely an empty form of thought. According to him, knowledge, Kantian epistemology lies within the realm of subjectivity and the external reality rests outside the domain of knowledge. So Hegel says that these heterogeneous elements, that is the subject which is the particular and in the form of being, and the predicate which is the universal and in the form of thought, are absolutely identical. It is reason alone that is the possibility of this positing of identity in judgment, for reason is nothing else but the identity of heterogeneous elements of this kind. Given this interpretation, Hegel thinks that Kant should have been led by the concept of judgment directly to his own conception of rationality as the recognition of the fundamental identity of being and thought. He believes that the nature of our thought and reality that Kant has contrasted are one and the same, because the true objectivity of thinking means that thought, far from being ours, must at the same time be the real essence of the things and of whatever is an object for us. Secondly, Hegel's criticism that Kant's philosophy is formal thinking is also linked up with this criticism of subjectivity. He points out that the problem with Kantian categories is that they are merely empty forms of thought that need to be filled up. But when they are filled up with materials from outside, they will be filled with empirical data that cannot reveal things in themselves. A key point of this objection is a complaint against the contingency of the application of the categories to any particular empirical data. Hegel objects to the fact that although our use of just such and such so many categories might be necessary in itself, there is no necessity that our categories apply to just these and no other particulars given by sensation. Thus, that these categories apply to just these particular empirical intuitions is something that Kant leaves quite contingent. Hegel has vehemently criticized Kantian dichotomy between the categories and the thing in itself. He points out that in Kantian philosophy, the origin of sensation must be left to the action of the things in themselves on our sensibility. Since we cannot cognize the things in themselves, the origin of sensation is therefore incomprehensible to us. In this way, Hegel points out that in Kantian philosophy, there is a gulf. On the one hand, a synthetic a priori knowledge, and on the other hand, the things in themselves. Such knowledge becomes abstract or formal without its involvement in the objective reality. Thirdly, that besides Hegel's criticism of subjectivity and formalism of Kant's critical philosophy, he is also critical of Kant's nature of knowledge. He argues that Kant makes knowledge into an instrument for the coercion of truth, but the question arises how this instrumental knowledge can be applied to something which is incomprehensible to us. In describe this point, in describe this point in Hegel's own words that appear in his lectures on the history of philosophy. Now, this criticism of Hegel against Kant's nature of philosophy is more serious and sound. If knowledge is an instrument whereby we attempt to possess the truth, it follows that knowledge is applied to something which is part of the concept of an instrument. The spheres and states Hegel talks about are metaphors for Kant's categories, which are in turn a priori conditions of knowledge. Hegel asserts that it is paradoxical to set up conditions of knowledge which make knowledge impossible. An instrument is not an instrument unless it has a proper application to something. Therefore, Hegel says that knowledge which makes reality as it is in itself unknowable is really no knowledge at all. Um, the instrument model shows Kant's epistemology to be self-refuting in a new sense, a theory of knowledge which asserts that knowledge is possible and yet makes knowledge is conceptual impossibility is self-contradictory. Thus, Uh, thus, throughout our discussion of Hegel's criticism of Kant, we have seen that Hegel wants to set aside what is dichotomous in Kant, it is appearance and thing in itself, or more appropriately, knowledge and reality. Hegel thinks that, like him, Kant can propose an all-inclusive reality that resolves all antagonisms. He says that the concept of an idea of an intuitive intellect or a divine intellect, which is precisely the idea of Kant, can overcome not only the opposition between thought and being, but also the opposition between theoretical and practical reason. But Hegel has pointed out that Kant glimpses but refuses to admit the identity of thought and being in his discussion of an idea of an intuitive intellect. Kant refers to such an intellect uh, in the critique of judgment, which introduces this intuitive understanding as an idea to which we can contrast the nature of our own understanding in order to bring out its limitations. Now, uh, the thing is that how far Hegel is successful in criticizing Kant with regard to this appearance and reality dichotomy or the subject and the object. Yes, though when we look at the critique of purism, then it's yeah, uh, yeah, he talks about this dichotomy, and Hegel is pretty right in criticizing Kant. But if we look at the other writings of Kant, particularly uh, in the critique of judgment, Kant is talking about the beautiful and the sublime. So here he is, in a sense, does not make any contradiction that he has made a contradiction in the critique of purity. So here, the beautiful and the sublime are both knowable. There is nothing unknowable there in the when you look at in the critique of the judgment. It is through the reflective power, because there in the critique of judgment, Kant talks about the reflective power of judgment, which is teleological in nature, that tries to bridge the dichotomy between the theoretical and the practical reason, which is there in his overall critique of pure reason. And Hegel is right only from the point of view of his critique of pure reason that Kant has made the distinction. But in other writings, particularly in the critique of judgment, he has not made such a dichotomy. And also when we go to the religion, Kant's religion, because Kant's knowledge within the bounds of sense, there also, particularly when we are referring to the divine command, So we are getting the command from the higher or the supernatural authority, and we are following it in the phenomenal domain. So ultimately, both the phenomenal and the nominal are united in in terms of religion that Kant is talking about. So this dichotomy also doesn't arise in religion and also in the critique of judgment. So Hegel is right only where the critique of pure reason is concerned about this dichotomy, but not in other writings. This is my findings, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, Professor Ma, please.
Well, since your specialization, if I'm not mistaken, is in Kant, no? So the minor mistake that we have committed said Kant died in 1774. That is wrong. He died in 1804.
Yeah, 1724 to 1804.
Yeah, but you said 1774. That's wrong. Said then Hegel got this done 1717.
1770 is Hegel's time, sir. 1770 to 1831 is Hegel.
1804, which you did not mention. You said 1774, no? Time mentioned. So that is a mistake, I'm saying.
No. Kant's time is 1724 to 1804.
Yeah, 1804.
1804.
Yeah.
And Hegel's time is 1770 to 1831.
Yeah, right. That's right. So here again, Kant, as I was saying in the morning, Kant has smuggled in the zeitgeist of his time. That is the religious dictum prevalent in his time was that belief, and you will know. Not take the Cartesian doubt, and you will know. So that had influenced Kant, and he smuggled into the back door of even his practical reason the immortality of the soul and the existence of God as postulate. Of course, the freedom is yes, that is all right, but the other two are not at all necessary. And that is where, although Hegelian understanding of God is also very different, not the traditional sense of God. Okay? Hegel. And Hegel has brought in the reason into the institutionalized form, both the reason and also the freedom into the institutional form, and that's how Hegel has made Germany as the best realizer of these two. You see? And that is where it has indirectly influenced Hitler of the Aryan faith previously.